Okay, so I wanted to start with a basic tour of the Jam controller. Obviously, Jam is different from other machine controllers. So let's take a look at the interface itself and see how the musical elements we use in Maschine, sounds, groups, patterns, and scenes, are laid out on the Jam. I want you to have a good overall sense of where things are to kind of help you understand the basic logic behind the layout and design of the controller. To start, we have 64 pads that make up over half the controller, but really it's a grid of 8 by 8. And those pads will have different roles depending on what we're doing with the controller. The roles that we put them in are called modes. We have a couple of different modes. We have step mode and play mode and keyboard mode, etc. Our default is song or project mode, which is what we're in right now. Across the top, we have a row of 8 buttons, labeled 1 through 8, and these are our project scenes. And we can have as many scenes as we want, but we're just looking at the first 8. We can always toggle over to more if we have them. Below the 8 by 8 grid, there's another row of 8 labeled A through H. They're right here, and those are our groups. And so the pad matrix really in project view is sets of columns, and each one corresponds to the group below. And all of the colored elements here are representing our patterns. Scenes can be selected to choose. We can notice how different ones are lighting up. Which patterns go into which scenes to sketch out the basic arrangement of our track. Note how the color of the group and the color of the patterns is the same. We can actually change those, but by default, they're the same color as their group, and it really reflects the different concept and approach of the Jam. The main view of the controller is the elements of our song that's focused on the combinations of patterns that we choose and a bunch of ways to control them with strips and knobs, as opposed to a regular controller where we're really looking at the sounds in groups and adjusting things at that level. And on previous versions of Maschine and with previous controllers, our core focus really was on sounds and groups. And you actually had to move away from the default view to work with patterns and scenes. Arrangement was definitely a trickier aspect of working in a Maschine. This goes a long way towards improving it and really looking at that aspect of music production and creation. But moving on, below our groups we have 8 touch strips. These are called smart strips, and so they have a number of different roles, but there are ways that we can control different parameters, aspects, everything from mixing levels to macro controls to panning and sends and all kinds of cool performance things. They have a bunch of functions, so we'll look at them a little later on. Below the smart strips we have a row of 8 primarily control buttons: transport, play and record, left and right arrow, tempo, grid, solo, and mute, which are all fairly common terms you might be familiar with. On each side, it's kind of already broken up into 4 sections, and we'll just worry about the main functions of them for now. In the top right here, we see first some level meters, and then 4 buttons: master, group, in one, and headphones, which are Q. And these let us look at various audio levels in the project and manipulate them. Directly below that is a rotary encoder, which we can use to adjust the levels of the buses, for example. We also use this to control a number of different aspects. It's one of our main ways of interacting with on-screen overlays and making selections, etc. And we can press this to make a selection or confirm an action. On the bottom right, first we have our browse. And we'll be using browse to load sounds, instruments, and plugins, and really explore the library system. Below this we have perform, notes, and lock. These are all different ways of interacting with like sounds and groups in real time to manipulate controls, parameters, make sounds. And then below that we have tune and swing, which, as you might guess, let us adjust tuning and swing parameters for different things like sounds and groups, both in real time and as we're maybe building up sounds and textures. And to finish off, we have select. Select is quite common. We'll often use that to call up, say, a particular pad or interact with some element. On the bottom left, we see shift. Shift, obviously, just like on a computer keyboard, lets us choose an alternate selection or an alternate property of something. So over play, it says restart, and it'll actually let us start from the beginning, or count in, metronome, loop. So we can hit shift and press one of those buttons, and we will be able to use the button for whatever the white text is. On the left side of the controller, there's a pair labeled auto and control, and respectively that's automation and control parameters to work with, say, plugins and its rate automation or what have you. Above that we have aux, level, and macro. letting us switch our smart strips between the aux levels, or sends to say effects, mix levels, and macro parameters, which if you've worked in Maschine, we're used to seeing macros that are attached to the aspects of a group or a plugin or a virtual instrument, and that's the way we can interact with them directly. Directly above that is our note repeat to let us switch from single notes to patterns and sequences for recording parts or performing. Then we have a D-pad here. This D-pad will let us work with the rotary to navigate, say, through the file browser and just make selections, etc. And up top are some more pattern and structural based tools. Duplicate and clear are probably pretty self-explanatory. Although clear is not quite the same clear as it is on, say, the Maschine Studio or what have you, and we'll look at that a little bit later. It actually will clear sound slots rather than just removing the events. Pad mode and step will let us shift the grid from patterns to looking at sounds or scales or sequences or what have you. And last but not least, in the top left is song. So song sends us back to the default view, project view, with scenes along the top and groups along the bottom and patterns vertically in the grid. That's a whole lot of buttons, and most of them have a bunch of different functions. But as we move into the next lesson, we'll start seeing how some of these work. And if you approach learning Jam with the perspective of how you accomplish a certain task or affect an aspect of your song, then you'll start to develop a sense of how these work more intuitively. And as you build up some basic workflows of your own, once you're comfortable with it, Maschine and Maschine Jam is really about directly interacting with the song and the elements within it. And it really makes a lot of sense as you start to learn new types of workflows and features. So now that we've got a basic understanding of the layout, we can start learning how to operate the controller. And so in the next section, we'll just go around this preset library song and just learn how to change patterns, load songs, control playback, etc. I'll see you there.